The views and opinions expressed during Love and Life with Lana and Dave are those only of the speakers and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or the position of our podcast hosts or affiliates. Any content provided is not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, individual, anyone, or anything. All right, let's do it.
You're listening to Love and Life with Lana and Dave, the podcast where logic is power and you take control. Thank you for tuning in and making the choice to listen in and get ideas for your own love and life. Now, here are your hosts, Lana Williams and David Vaccaro.
Hey, I'm Lana. How are you? I decided to put a couple of little podcasts together with some information that I had either blogged about or I have written about in other areas, podcasts that you may want to bookmark and keep aside in case you have any questions. But these are really going to be like hacky type things that you can do to get through situations in your life. So basically, I am an emotional person because I'm human. So nobody that's human doesn't have emotions, and I do. I just happen to process my emotions a little differently. And in the past, I have discussed, Dave and I have both discussed how not to make huge, major decisions based on your feelings or your emotions, that you need to, it's always good to take some time and process what you're feeling. So to me, feelings / emotions, these are things that for me are like a gauge. So if I'm going through life and I have a specific feeling or emotion, it's almost like I'm going to take that and try to use it to determine where I am. Am I on the right course? Am I in the wrong course? Am I somewhere where I don't want to be? Do I feel like I'm content with things that I've done? That kind of thing. So I don't really have a feeling and then decide to make a choice based on that decision so much. I know there are people who will feel and immediately react to that feeling. I try not to do that, and I've never done that. Now, I have always processed my emotions and tried to analyze them. I've always done that. When I was a kid, and even now, but when I was a kid, one of my favorite things was to find out how things work the way they did, take things apart, or, sit down with a pen and paper and step by step, go through a process of whatever, some kind of thing to discover what made it work. I was very interested in why things were the way they were and then how they worked. So I've always been that way. I'm that way with the way people are, with how they think, with what they do. So I have a constant curiosity about stuff around me that most people don't notice, which of course is probably very annoying for everybody else. People are always telling me to just let go of everything and just stop thinking about it, but it's just not the way that I'm wired. So I just wanted to go through the 5-step process of feeling, because this is something that I've always done. And I, at some point, found online a 5-step meme about processing emotions that I thought was amazing, because it was something that I had always done and I had never seen it in writing, or I had never seen somebody actually present it to me. So I wasn't aware that I did it. Don't get me wrong. I've had a temper in my life and that kind of thing. And I just take my feelings though, and I don't react quickly to them. I just sort of take them and say, okay, well, I feel upset, but why do I feel upset? What caused this? If I have a feeling, I usually look around and find out where it came from and what's happening and why I feel the way I do. And then, is it something that makes sense? Am I feeling a certain way about something that has nothing to do with what's happening or not? So basically there's a 5-step process, and I'm going to put this up on our social media. So this will be on the Instagram. I'll throw it up on Twitter. I'll throw it up on Facebook. But what it is having, from the time you have an emotion to what you do about it, the 5 steps that would be helpful. And it's something that would be, it can't hurt to do this. It's always good to take a couple of minutes when you have an emotion. Before we get started, I am going to say, based on a couple of podcasts we had, but recently we had one on men's health. And in that podcast, I mentioned that it seems like, again, things have changed a little since I was a kid, but it seems like there were acceptable emotions for us as kids that we had. So we are programmed for two emotions. Not that that's the two emotions that we feel, but it's the two emotions that it seems to be okay to express as far as society's concerned. I would say for women, being upset, crying, that's an emotion that for women is an acceptable emotion. Again, everything has exceptions, so I'm not talking about everybody in the world. But the majority, especially when I was growing up, women crying was okay. You could cry, and when you cried, you didn't necessarily, people would stop and they would come over and they would comfort you. Technically, that was a positive reaction for women, and it programmed us to, I would say, funnel anything to that emotion, and that emotion would be the outward emotion that we would show. And people would come over and they'd be supportive to that. And that was a good thing, except most of the time that we were crying, a lot of times we were crying for some other emotion because that was the one we knew we could show, but that wasn't necessarily the emotion we were feeling. So when we got angry, we cried. If we got frustrated, we cried. Sometimes when we're happy, we cry. But for women, crying is a widely acceptable emotion. And people are like, oh, okay, she's crying because she's happy, or she's crying because she's frustrated. We don't get told that we're wrong for doing that. So identifying feelings is a very important thing because we don't normally do that. We sort of just say that most of our emotions for women are a result of crying emotion. And I guess that's okay for most people, but for me, that's not necessarily true. It's not accurate. It's just that's the one emotion that doesn't get scrutiny from society. The next thing that I want to talk about is anger. And for most men, and again, not all, and mostly more when I was growing up, men were not allowed to cry. Just like women were not allowed to be angry because it was something that we would get pushback for as women. To be angry was just not ladylike, and we had to be ladylike growing up. Men were more geared to be angry for emotions that they weren't feeling, but that was the emotion that was acceptable to society. So just like when women were upset, they would cry. When men were sad, they would get angry, or they would outwardly show anger. They would express anger. And the world was like, oh, he's sad, so he's, punching walls because that's what guys do, and that's okay. They would get support for that. It would be a different type of support than women got, but it wasn't as frowned upon as if they were to cry. If they were to cry, it would be a shameful event, and, that kind of stuff. People would immediately react and tell them that they needed to cut it out. They needed to suck it up and all that kind of stuff. So I'm saying that these are the two dominant emotions because those are the two that, as I grew up, those were the two emotions that really most people, whether they were male or female, those were the two that got expressed the most. Obviously, men would express anger and women would express sadness the most. So identifying emotion is something that's important. And then trying to figure out how to express it if you need to at all is also another thing. So here we go. I'm going to go through my 5 steps of what I do when I feel an emotion. And then how I handle it. Again, I'm not going to tell you what I actually do because each one of the emotions I feel is different. And so my reaction or my end result is going to change based on what it is. And I've felt all kinds of different emotions. And so I don't always react or act on them at all or whatever. But so for number 1, it would be sensing the emotion. And so you're standing somewhere and you sense it. You're saying, okay, I'm pissed off. I'm pissed right now. Just pissed. Let's say that you're mad. As a woman, you're mad. So you have to say, okay, I feel it. I feel that I'm pissed. I mean, this is really just acknowledging that you feel the emotion. Physically, you're feeling the emotion. Your face gets hot. You want to punch something. Whatever it is, you have a physical reaction and you sense something. And then you name the feeling. So that's number 2. Number 2 is naming the feeling. Well, I'm pissed off, but like, am I really pissed off? Or am I do I feel that I've been, what exactly am I feeling? And I actually have a feelings wheel that I'll put up as well. So there's all different types of, you can be angry, but there's all different types of anger. You can be sad, but there's all different types of sadness. You can be frustrated. You can be disappointed. There's all these subcategories of each feeling. So you could say, well, all right, I know I'm frustrated, but let me go beyond that. You know what I mean? I feel like I've been snubbed, or I feel like somebody's disregarded my feelings, or whatever the case may be. So you have to, it's good to learn how to accurately actually label the feeling that you have. There's a lot of reasons for that, but like, I think it's just better to understand the feeling and know that like every time you have every time you're angry, it may not be this for the same reason and not the same type of anger. And every time you're sad, you may not be the same kind of sad every single time. You may be melancholy sometimes. You may be depressed sometimes. You may be disappointed sometimes. And these are all negative, sad feelings, but they're not all the same feeling and they're not for the same reason. So good at naming those feelings. And then you basically want to go from what the feeling is to like, okay, now that I know what this feeling is, I want to identify what caused the feeling. The reason I think this is important is because, let's say, in my case, again, I've done this my whole life. And so I'm going to explain being out with some guy somewhere, or in a restaurant or out somewhere. The example of that is this, because I can very clearly explain that if I'm out with some guy and I feel suddenly mad, I'm going to be like, wait a minute. I mean, usually for me that I have an anger, and you have to determine what's causing the anger, what kind of anger it is. You know what I mean? Am I mildly angry? The different types of anger that I feel, and then whatever it is I feel, I then need to know what the cause of that is. The cause might be something the person I'm with did to me. It might be something somebody in the room did to me that had nothing to do with the person I was with. It might be something I'm angry about that I've done that caused something to happen that I wish I didn't do. Could be anything. Could be that I spilled my water and I'm upset about that, whatever. However, some of the emotions you feel in the moment may be caused by something that, it mirrors that happened to you 2 relationships ago. And it's really important to know that. You may be mad at the person you're with, and they may say something in the moment that you just like, I can't believe this person said that, and you go all crazy. But it's not fair to the partner you're with, the person you're with. It could be just like you're out with friends, whatever it is. But the person you're mad at, that you're in the room with, it's not fair to get mad at them because it reminds you of something somebody said 10 years ago without understanding that that's what that is. And most people are really understanding about that kind of thing if they're aware of what it is that triggers it. I mean, that's a trigger technically. So let's say, you were in a relationship 10 years ago and some guy left you on the side of the road, and right before he did, he called you some kind of name. And then this new guy that you've met 10 years later, calls you with that name. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of something that he could say, even in like an affectionate way. But to you, that word just means this thing that happened to you 10 years ago, and that's all you hear. It's not objectively fair to get upset with this guy in front of you over something that somebody said to you 10 years ago. And if you're not aware that it bothers you and you haven't really resolved the issue from 10 years ago, you blocked it out or you stuffed it down or something happened where you just never dealt with it, it's likely going to cause a problem in your current relationship. And so it's good to know what the cause is and really know that it's something that's triggering something from before, because it will totally change the way you deal with it now. And if you're in a relationship that's fairly good and you're happy, you don't want to ruin it because this guy said something that reminds you of a guy that you dated 10 years ago that was a jerk or whatever, because the two aren't related. It would be better to say, listen, you said this thing and it didn't mean anything to you, and why would it? But I just want you to know that I dated somebody like 10 years ago that would say this to me, and he treated me this way. And when you talked to me and you called me this name, it reminds me of that horrible relationship from 10 years ago, the person you're with's probably going to be like, oh, okay, well, I just won't say that, and that'll be the end of that. My way of dealing with things like this is to find out the exact trigger, the exact reason it's triggering me, the whole bit, and then sit down with the person I'm currently dating and say, listen, this, when you do this, I will never tell somebody what to do and what not to do, because I have no control over them, and I don't want to boss them around. It's their choice. What I do is just let them know like what the consequences of that choice are. So you don't have to call me this, but I can't tell you what to do. So I would prefer you didn't. But if you're going to, here's what's going to happen. This is a reaction I'm going to have to that. Just letting you know that if you call me this and I react like this is why. Here's the story behind that. All you're doing is sitting down and you're informing the person you're with of your history, obviously, especially when it comes to something that you guys are talking about in the current time. That's important, obviously, to them to understand what the trigger is. Why is it bothering you? To me, that's a productive way to deal with it. But to just get upset and start yelling and screaming and leaving, and the person at the table was just like, I don't know what just happened. It's not fair to them to not understand any of that. So you owe it to yourself to say, okay, well, what am I feeling? And then what is causing this feeling? And what's really causing it? And if you need time to find that out, then you need time to find that out. In my case, if it's so overwhelming that I can't think straight, then I'll extract myself from the situation. I may leave the place and go outside and just sort of get away from the noise and whatever, and just sort of like be able to, so I can sit down somewhere and just kind of think. If it's overwhelming enough and horrible enough, I may go home. I've done that, where I just need to go home and get away from everybody so I could just dig and find out what, because a lot of times something will trigger me and I'm not aware of what caused it, and it's just as surprising to me as everybody else. And so I need to go do some work on whatever that is. And then from your cause, once you know what the cause is and you're aware of it, the next thing to do would be number 4, which is evaluate and say, okay, I feel this way because this happened, but like, is it a valid feeling? Is the feeling that I feel appropriate for what happened? So if I go off the charts and I have a 10 reaction to something that was technically a 2, I have to weigh that out and say, okay, well, I'm reacting way too much to something that was like this level. So to me, it's inappropriate that my reaction is this high for this thing. And of course, usually when you have a really crazy reaction like that to something that's happening now, it's because something happened in the past that you didn't really deal with correctly, and it built up. And now this poor person in front of you, this poor sucker that doesn't know anything about it, innocently says something that he doesn't mean, or she doesn't mean any harm to say, but for you, there's some thorn that you haven't dealt with from 10 years ago that this thing triggers. And sometimes you may not be aware of how bad the trigger is going to be till it happens. So you're just as overwhelmed by it. So to me, the worst thing to do is just fire off at the person across from you and just, say stuff you can't take back. That makes no sense to me. I know a lot of people do it, but so this is something, like I said, I'm wired for this, but this is something that if you get into a habit of doing, it will become second nature to you. You can learn something like this, And then number 5 for me is to act. Once I evaluate and I say, okay, well, this incident was a 2, but I kind of reacted like a 10. And I know what caused it, and what caused it was something that happened 15 years ago. What's my act from there? What am I actually going to do? Number 5 is the thing I do with the feeling I get. But I ran all those steps in between the feeling and my action. A lot of times my action is inaction, meaning there's nothing I can do about it. I'm not going to go crazy and burn down someplace because I didn't like the way somebody said something to me that had nothing to do with anything going on today and something that happened 15 years ago. That's just not an appropriate response. So the only thing I can do is communicate. Now, my act might be just to communicate what happened. If I act a certain way, then, I at least owe it to somebody who doesn't know anything about what's going on. I owe them an explanation as far as like what is that is actually happening. What they said, how it affected me, and then why. And then a future plan. To me, everything, like, I know it sounds like everything's a board meeting to me. There's no passion in throwing things around and screaming and yelling and picking up the phone and hanging up. I mean, I don't personally operate that way. I like to sit down and say, okay, so we were out tonight, and, like I said, it depends on what it is. And if it's something that I overreacted to that really wasn't a big deal when I objectively looked at it, and I knew that the person in front of me couldn't possibly mean any harm to me, but I took it the wrong way, I will later in conversation explain. I know that I was like a little bit whatever earlier tonight. Well, let me explain why. Here's what happened. And so I just want you to know that, when you wrinkle your nose like that, it just reminds me of some stupid thing that happened 10 years ago. It has nothing to do with you wrinkling your nose, but it just triggers this thing. And I know I need to deal with that, but I just want you to know that this is my reaction that I had to you. This is why it happened. It's fair for somebody who's completely innocent in front of you that has no idea what happened to you 15 years ago, at least where this particular thing is concerned. It's only fair that you give them that information. Now, they have the information. They're informed. They know exactly what it is that happened and how it feels when they do a thing that triggers it. Now you leave it in their hands and they say, well, all right, I won't do this in the future. If it's something they can't help but do, and it's some kind of weird habit or, mannerism that they have, they're at least aware of it triggering you. Even if they do it without meaning to, again, they'll at least know, oh, hey, she told me that this is not something she likes, or whatever. So that they can, at least to me, they're getting a roadmap of your response and why. And if you're in a relationship that you want to keep and it's important to you, I would say that it would be fair to give them that information, because you want to build some kind of trust foundation together with this person. It's fair that they have that information, So then you together can work on a game plan. Okay, well, listen, I'm going to try not to do that in the future. And, remind me, or it's not really their job to be reminded, or it's not your job to remind them. But if that's something that the two of you decide is a good idea, then you both make a plan to do that. And in the future, if they do something repeatedly, or they do something again, they have the foresight to stop and say, oh my goodness, I know you told me that you didn't like that. Some people will continue to do it and not care. And I guess that's also part of the plan of like, okay, what kind of person am I dealing with here? If you're getting to know somebody new, they may or may not be sensitive to what bothers you and what doesn't. And again, then you make your decision on what kind of person you're with and whether you want to stay with that person based on how they react to information you give them. So, and that's all getting to know a new person. That's just kind of life, I guess. But anyway, those are your 5 steps. I just wanted to give someone that might need the information a good way to deal with emotions. I know a lot of people that say, well, I can't help it. I just fly off the handle and I don't know how to. And it's kind of like, all right, well, if I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to post this picture so that you can see it. But yes, your 5 steps are that you want to sense the emotion, sense the feeling, name the feeling, not how do I feel or what do I want to do, but like what exactly is this feeling I'm feeling? Is it excitement? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it, what's the exact subcategory of emotion that I'm actually feeling? Not what do I want to express, but what is underneath that, and then going from there to saying, okay, what attributed this feeling, what actually caused it. Something happened tonight or something happened in the last 10 minutes that caused this feeling. Let me pinpoint it. Let me put my finger on it and find out what it was. Is it from today? Is it from yesterday? Is it from 5 years ago or from 10 years ago? I need to know. And then once you know that, is it an appropriate feeling? Do I feel that it's appropriate that I'm feeling frustrated or disappointed or anxious or anything that I'm feeling right now? Is it appropriate? Does it match what's happening? Am I having a reaction that's a 10 to something that is a 1? Okay, that's not appropriate. It's nothing to do with what's going on here. That's something from So I don't really need to do anything about this other than maybe inform the person I'm with, because they're important to me. I want to make sure they understand that this caused that. And at the end, acting on the feeling. You may be in a 10 situation. You may be with a person who did something that was at the level 10 and you had a response to level 10 and it's in the moment and it's accurate and it's evaluated as valid. And you have every right to get up and walk away from that person and never talk to them again. But the best thing to do is to find out first by going through the steps whether that's correct. So if you want to get up and walk out on a guy that really didn't do anything wrong, this is the time to say, okay, well, how am I going to handle this? Oh, you know what? All of this checks out. I did 1 through 4. And you know what? This guy's a jerk that I'm sitting with. And he said something that's unforgivable. And I don't need to sit here anymore and deal with this. And I'm going to walk away. That's my reaction, or that's how I'm going to act on this feeling. So again, in my case, probably 80%. I love to throw my statistics around. I don't actually have a chart and graph on this, but something like over the years, in my case, something like 80%, 82% maybe of what I go through, I never act on. It's like not something that needs to be acted on. It's something I toss it. I'll throw it in the trash. Again, it depends on what it is. If it's important for the person I'm with to know, then my action really is only just to give them the information. And to me, that's like a non-act. I'll just kind of, in conversation, bring it up. So if you're like me and you're analytical, it's not normal to just to do this for the rest of the world. So the fact that you don't knee-jerk and kick back immediately with a response is weird to some people. So you're going to run into people that are going to try to almost get an emotional response out of you because they think you're sociopathic. It's not the case. You're just... I think it's a healthy way to do it. There's no need to immediately react to anything unless you're in imminent danger and you're going to be killed or something where you have to react right away. The feeling of dread, the feeling of fear, based on something that's actually happening to you, that's different. But in most cases, when you have a feeling that crops up out of all of a sudden and you're sort of in a normal environment, in a normal situation, most of those feelings are based on something that's not actually happening in the moment. And usually most of them are not don't require a huge amount of action right there and then. Most of them are subconscious or something that's sitting in the back of your mind that is triggered by something that somebody does in front of you that, isn't something they mean to do. Again, like I said, you may be sitting with somebody that's completely meaning to hurt you and wants to say stuff to you over and over again. They don't care how you feel. But then now that depends on, that's also going to fall under your act of, am I going to deal with this person going on from here? So it will suss out people that are no good for you. It will suss out trauma that you've dealt with before and is cropping up in new situations and isn't really called for. It will suss out information or data or trauma that you haven't dealt with. And you need to kind of maybe go back and navigate. It will suss out the difference between the situation and the reaction. Again, this thing is, I've done this my whole life and it's normal. So I've never applied this. I can't say anything about somebody who does anything. I don't know anything about how to do anything different. So I've never really had very many crazy emotions and just responded. So I don't know much about that. But this has never served me wrong. As a matter of fact, it's been a godsend for me in a lot of cases where if I did react right away, it would have been completely horrible for me to do it. And like I said, it doesn't mean that I'm not emotional. It doesn't mean I'm not passionate. It just means I feel my feeling and I go through it and I find out what it means. And I sort of, I navigate what's happening to me, but I don't necessarily make huge decisions or really big reactions. None of that comes from the way I feel. It's just sort of, to me, a feeling is how I gauge my life. Okay, well, everything seems to be okay, or life is good, or it more or less is for me to navigate my own path and see whether or not, for me, I feel like I'm in the right place. So anyway, I know that I've kind of alluded to this here and there in a couple of episodes, but I really haven't gone through the whole thing. So this is basically just a podcast on just that in case you want any more detail. And again, like I said, I'll put this picture up. You can print it, throw it on your phone, whatever you need to do. And so anytime you have a weird feeling or something's going on, you can actually pull it up and go through the steps of what you need to do. And then eventually it'll become second nature to you and you'll just kind of do it anyway. But at first it'll be good to kind of follow. So I'll put it up for you. And so that wraps up this podcast. Let's see here. Oh, this isn't a short one. This is only half an hour or so. So these are, I'm going to drop them. I'm dropping a few data podcasts and I'll have them handy and ready to go in case need be. So if you do not have subscription to us, if you are listening to us on whatever platform it is, www.laneanddave.com is our website. And then on our website, if you go there, there's a place where you can, it'll show you every single platform that our podcast is available on. And it's pretty much all of them. If you are listening to us on iHeart or Apple or Audible, there should be a place to subscribe. So, find a place the place to subscribe on the specific platform. Obviously, in every platform, it's set up a different way. So I couldn't tell you every single one and how they work. But if you're used to it, you probably know where to go. So just hit subscribe. That'll give you the episode. As soon as the episode comes out and it's published and put up, you will get it immediately. You won't have to go look for it. If you can, give us a 5-star review. And so if you scroll down where the notes are and everything like that, there should be a place to review us. And if you like listening to us, give us 5 stars. That makes our podcast, a whole lot more reachable or findable for other people. Find a friend that you think would be interested in this podcast or find something that we say useful, helpful to them, and get them to subscribe. We would appreciate that. Give us a call as well. We have our number, which is 800-894-2158. Let's see if I got that right. I had to put my, here we go. So 1-800-894-2158. This is just our 800 number, and it just sort of like is a place where you can leave messages for us. If you do not want your name or your voice used, let us know. It's possible we may put it, we may play it on the podcast, but if you don't want us to do that, let us know. We won't. But that's for anything. Suggestions, you can tell us you think we're great. You can tell us you think we're horrible. You can leave us a joke. You can ask us to discuss a specific topic. You can tell us a story. You can ask us for advice, anything like that. So laneanddave.com, that's where all our platforms are, and that's where all our social media is. And again, buymeacoffee.com/LanaandDave. That's where you go to buy us coffees. And we drink our coffees while we do our podcast. So guys, keep us rolling in coffee because we love it. We will talk to you soon. I just hope you enjoyed this as a little Between You and Me podcast where I drop some information, some hopefully useful information for you to navigate your life with a little logic. Have a great day. We will see you soon.
Hey, you just listened to Love and Life with Lana and Dave. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please share the podcast, leave us a comment or review, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any new content. We'll see you soon.